Hi, in this video, we will going to cover creating a VM cluster network and provisioning a VM cluster on Exadata Cloud Customer. In this demo, I will demonstrate how to create a VM cluster network, how to validate a VM cluster network, and how to provision a VM cluster on Exadata Cloud Customer. Now, let's take a look. On your OCI console, under the Oracle database, click Exadata Cloud Customer. Now choose the region and compartment that contains the Exadata infrastructure for which you want to create the VM cluster network. On the infrastructure details page, click Create VM Cluster Network. Provide the display name and be ready to provide the requested information in the data center network details page. Now provide the client network details. So you need to provide the VLAN ID, netmask, database server's starting IP address, gateway IP address, specify the hostname prefix used to generate the hostnames in the client network, and specify the domain name for the client network. Next is to provide the backup network details. Provide the VLAN ID, specify the IP netmask for the backup network, hostname prefix used to generate hostnames in the backup network, database server's IP address range for the backup network, IP address of the backup network gateway, then specify the domain name for the backup network. Then provide your DNS and NTP server IP address. You can also configure advanced options. Under the network, you can assign a scan listener port or make use of the default, which is 1521. You also have an option to apply tags. Then click Next and review configuration. The review configuration page displays detailed information about the VM cluster network, including the hostname and the IP address allocations. Now click Create VM Cluster Network. You will see that the status will change to creating. Now go to the Work Request Details page to monitor the progress of the VM cluster network creation and wait until the creation of your VM cluster network is completed. Initially, after creation, you will see that the lifecycle state is set to requires validation. Now click Validate VM Cluster Network. Validation performs a series of automated checks on the VM cluster network. After a successful validation, you will see that the lifecycle state will change from validating to validated, and the VM cluster network is ready to use. Since we're done on creating our VM cluster network, we can now proceed on provisioning our VM cluster. In the Resources tab, under the VM clusters, click Create VM Cluster. Choose a compartment, provide a display name, choose a VM cluster network definition to use for the VM cluster, choose the Oracle Grid Infra version that you want to install on the VM cluster, specify the OCPU count per VM. Requested OCPU count for the VM cluster displays the total number of CPU cores allocated to the VM cluster. Specify memory per VM. Specify the local file system size per VM. Then configure your Exadata storage. You can also check the option to allocate storage for Exadata sparse snapshots and for local backups. In the Add SSH keys, you can specify the public key portion of an SSH key pair that you want to use to access the VM cluster virtual machines. Next is to choose a license type for your VM cluster. Choose between the Bring Your Own license or License Included, which is to subscribe to Oracle Database software licenses as part of the Exadata Cloud Customer. You can also configure advanced options to set the time zone for the Exadata infrastructure and optionally to apply tags. Once you have provided all the required information, then you can click Create VM Cluster. The VM Cluster Details page is now displayed. Now you can see that the status is provisioning. You can monitor the operation state from the Work Request tab and wait until the VM cluster has been successfully provisioned. When the VM cluster creation process completes, the state of the VM cluster changes to available.